give you the
Awesome.
floor.
Yeah, let's just introduce ourselves and then we'll get into like a back and forth rapid fire of like our top 3 to 5 stories of kind of big clicks we made in the industry. Maybe one of our first inspections when we kind of had some aha moments, some memorable ones, maybe some that you can learn in theory from all these videos or articles and certification courses and all that. But until you're there, I mean, then you start making so many connections, and that's a big transition of mine. So I'm Andrew with Melrose Mold Solutions, and I've done hundreds of inspections with Mold Authority as a company. I was formerly Mold Authority Live, doing third-party assessments, writing specific protocols, doing tests, and watching the remediation process be done from A to Z. Really, the goal is to get it done successfully, so I don't have to keep backtracking. But we're dealing with microbiology, so it can get pretty complex at times. That's why you need someone, third party like one of us, to really assess the area and make sure that the job is being done fully and effectively. And so after doing all these inspections, I started to see there's a big demand for the education online and people asking for consulting and coaching all around the country. So thought to get doing a lot more educational info. That's how this page was birthed, and now helping people all around the country and really the world with helping them walk through that mold timeline. That's a very important post I've made on my page and a big philosophy I go by on how to progress through this so there's actually an end in sight. And yeah, we'll start talking about our stories, but I want to hear from you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff, and I think it's super important how you bring up, the importance of not only doing the stuff but actually doing it right and hiring the third party assessor, not just the mold remediator who's going to do your test. Because if you do it wrong, you can really end up in kind of a perpetual
Right.
cycle of not only spending money and time, but the mold is actually affecting you. So things get harder and harder along the way.
True.
Um, but my background is in environmental science and policy. That's how it started in college, and eventually environmental law. I went to law school down here in Miami,
Awesome.
and that was kind of before the mold. Once I learned about the mold, which started off really just a job with a good friend, it really turned into an understanding of how there's a huge environmental disaster, and it's actually an indoor environmental disaster,
Right.
and it's across the world. I used to be more climate change focused, stuff like that, but this is really hits home. And I've had 2 mold remediations in my mom's apartment in the past year, and it hits home for a lot of people. And like you said, I don't think you really know until you see it.
Yeah.
And that's really, for a lot of people, it's not too late, but once you see the problems happening to you, it's that's really go time. So I think it's great that we share content so people can hopefully see what someone else has gone through and prevent that.
That's right.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people already asking questions, which we'll get to, unless
Yeah.
unless you want
I
to
think
answer away.
I think we can scroll back and answer all the questions towards the end. Hate to put you guys on hold, but I do think we should share some stories and just really practical on-site experience, because if we can empower homeowners to know what they're looking for and know what to avoid in the process, then you don't need to be a part of all the horror stories that at times happen with mold, right? You can get on top of it, you can be proactive, you can work with an assessor to really get this done effectively. But as a homeowner, you can know that a lot of problems can be solved from proper maintenance and know-how of how the home is supposed to function, while also knowing that if a leak does happen or a flood does happen, all these storms do happen, how to get on top of it ASAP. So right off the bat, I'll just say that so in hurricane season quickly, if a leak or flood or something active and acute happens, then right away you do want to get an IICRC certified company to come in and do the drying and assessment of everything really quickly within 24 to 48 hours, ideally, before mold can even have a chance to grow. Okay, mold will grow if it's not handled effectively and at the right time or in the right amount of time. And that's when you would need a mold assessor like this to really assess the area and then get now the protocols switch from water restoration, which I have certifications in. That's the S500 protocols, and now has to switch over to the S520 protocols, which is mold remediation standards. You got to do a little bit extra. So we're trying to avoid that by getting on top of water damage areas before they become mold. Now, many homes, we inherit the history of the home. There's already mold issues, and that's what we're going to talk about, is sharing some of our stories of what we've found. I've got a bunch, man. I want to start quick on just a quick success story because that those we need to share as well. There's so many, really bad situations out there, and unfortunately, there's just a lot of fear in this industry. But there are solutions and positive stories as well. I want to share. So a very recent one, I've shared this as well, but went through the whole house of a client's home. Everything looked pretty good. I think there was an issue in the master shower, but nothing big enough that I thought was bringing a real burden on the body. But there were some significant symptoms. These people are kind of doing everything they can for their health, especially with eczema. They even have their own company of good, health products for their skin directly, and still the eczema is not going away. So they're like, let's just at least check the box of the home. That's an important thing to check. Sure enough, my final step in the assessment was to get to the attic and the HVAC system up there. Well, they told me that the previous owner was a hoarder and they had about this thick worth of whatever was in the system and the ductwork. I'm like, this thing's probably not even going to work much longer based on how much, contamination's in there building up. But that's probably definitely messing with air quality here. So sure enough, they change out the whole system and the ductwork. And she sends me a text 6 days after getting it all replaced. Said I couldn't believe this as it was happening, but here's the before and after. And her hands cleared up from eczema within like 6 days of replacing the system and the ductwork. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah, great to hear. And I think, the success stories are so important. Everyone tells us, we're fear mongers and all this, but we're really just trying to share the success stories. And a lot of that starts with something that's not very pretty to look at.
Right, right.
But I think it's important how you talk about AC and ductwork because I think that's one of the most important
For
and
sure.
misunderstood because there's definitely a science to HVAC. And I think frankly, even most of the AC guys don't understand it or they don't care because they're making so much money running from house to house. But um, I think it's super important, especially here in Florida and Texas, where it gets hot, humid, and even the hurricanes and the storms. It can destroy your not only your home but the ductwork, the AC. And it actually does make me think of one of the stories I wanted to share, which was back in my first year of inspecting. I've been doing this about 5 years now. Um, a community down here in South Florida that's well known for older people to live there. And we see mold there all the time, of course. But one of the one of the clients was took it upon herself to make herself feel better by breathing fresh air from her AC unit. So what she would do, and it was amazing, this old lady would hop up on a chair, she would stick her face up to her AC register and breathe this fresh air. And it took me, it takes a while for you to realize that the least fresh air in your home is probably coming out of that unit. I mean, realistically, these units are putting out, I just made some posts about the bacteria, the mold, and people don't realize bacteria, mold, that can be an airborne issue.
Yeah.
And, I say knowledge is power, but don't try to just make up a lot of times these self help methods of, oh, I'll just clean it up myself. Or I see a lot of questions about chemicals. I'll just put some chemicals, or I'll just I can get fresh air out of my AC. That's going to make me feel better. But you really have to take a second and think, is my AC in good shape? Is my
Right.
ductwork in good shape? Is my home in good shape? Or am I better off being outside at that point? And people don't maybe understand, but a lot of times your indoor environment can be much moldier, especially in the air, than the outdoor
Yeah.
environment.
It's a contained area. So if you got a bunch of sources, it's just building up in our recycled air box.
Absolutely. And that was one of the wake up calls like, wow, these people really need help because not only are they sick, and she had, this older lady, she had the breathing machine next to her bed,
Mm.
but it's like this was her daily fresh air from the AC unit. And guess what was in the ductwork? It was filled with mold, the AC unit too. So super important. Um, and, plenty of other, I tell people be careful taking it into your own hands, even cleaning up, like even something as simple as dusting or an ERMI test, for example, which I consider pretty close to dusting. You're collecting a dust sample. You really have to be careful doing that yourself because you can create a disturbance. So whether it's chemical cleaning, dusting, trying to medicate yourself with AC air, you really have to be careful with the DIY approach. And if possible, leave it to the professionals. It'll save you in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting story. So you definitely found out that the AC was an issue there and then got that solved.
Yeah. Majority of what I do, a lot of what I see, the problems are in the AC and the ductwork,
A lot.
99% of the time. And
I know.
even if that's not the main issue, it's going to end up becoming a main issue because it
Right.
can be contaminated. But I've even, I'm not a big fan of duct cleanings. I'm more of a fan of replacement, which we can probably talk about,
For sure.
for an hours. But I did happen to have a duct cleaning myself in an old apartment, and I even felt pretty much better after that. Just the amount of when you have clean air, the difference that makes
For
is just
sure.
so huge, and it's almost like crazy when you can actually breathe through your nose, and you're like, wow, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, guys, I'm seeing the questions come in. We're going to get to them. We're going to just share some inspector stories that we've had first, and then we'll rip through all the questions as we go. I think if we take them one by one, we'll end up missing a bunch, and I'd rather just roll through them all towards the end. So just hang in there. Some good stories that you guys will learn a lot if you listen, closely to what we're doing and the trained eye we're trying to kind of impart to you all. So one interesting one. This is again what homeowners can do to be aware of. Very basic. Don't block vents. Okay. So there was one couple that had floor vents. Okay. Crawl space is where the HVAC system was, the ductwork coming up through the floors. They had multiple pieces of furniture blocking multiple vents. So over time, they didn't even know this was happening. I don't even think they changed their filters. Again, this is a maintenance, lack of maintenance issue. But blocking the vents caused all this cold air to back up. It started sweating. Basically, the crawl space started raining down there, and the floors started even getting wet, soaking and warping. Oh my gosh, it was really intense. Getting down to that crawl space was so wet, and that was a big click for me very early on. Is like you cannot mess with the air pressure, differentials in the home, and just think I'm just going to stop the air over on this side. It's really going to back up the system. They say the HVAC system are the lungs of the home. So if you're starting to suffocate certain parts of it, it's going to have some downstream effects. So that was a pretty wild one. It needed a full crawl space remediation, replacement of the system, the ductwork, and even some of the subfloors cut out because of how soaking wet it got.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big major thing. Condensation left and right is a huge mold issue. People don't realize, and they think it's very normal, which it more or less is kind of a normal thing. You're going to have condensation, but the outcomes of that is the mold growth that's going to come.
Right.
And I think that's another big danger. Oh, mold is normal. It's common. That's another big major misconception. Is it common? Yes, but is it dangerous? Yes. Just like a lot of the other things we have in our home, that everybody has that. It can't be bad for us.
Right.
But you really have to, you'll be lucky to live in a low mold home. You're never going to have a mold free home. Um, but super important how you talk about, the AC unit, the condensation, and home ownership is hard enough. It comes with enough struggles.
For sure.
And if you're gonna put this huge machine in your home, you got the condenser outside, you got this other machine inside, you're gonna sleep basically right next to it. You better know how it works, or at least understand that it's supposed to have airflow. If you're putting an AC in a closet, or even like in a hot attic, humid attic, garage, I'm not fans of those, but they need ventilation. That's why people put slats on their closet doors. But people definitely have to watch for that.
Yeah.
I just saw the other week, really unfortunate, brand new ductwork. The lady replaced it because of the protocols. There was a lot of mold, and then the brand new ductwork is soaking wet now. Condensation. There's actually water in the ductwork, like
Yeah.
filling up the tubes,
That's
and it's the mold. You can imagine how the mold probably looks in there, but it's really and the importance of finding a good HAC guy who can really be that go-to guy who's not gonna rip you off, and that's hard.
yeah.
Um, NADCA, of course, is one of the big associations that has some great people working there.
And
Um,
ACCA, ACCA as well as another good certification. But you do want to just know what to, and we're not going to go through all this right now, but kind of a bit how to vet them because online they can look good, but you do want to ask them a handful of questions. Would be good to get in touch with us on what some of that might be. But it's a very technical thing. I mean, mold is the result of something. So if we have 10 different industries that all are trying to avoid it, but then it finally happens, we have to backtrack now and make sure the plumber does his job right, the HVAC people do theirs. You got to get the right size system. I've even seen that recently. A brand new, beautiful home, everything's good. but the system was too big. It's not pulling the humidity out, and now you got a widespread humidity issue. That was another story of mine where the house was immaculate. It was beautiful, and they're having spots of white and green pop up in different places. Where what's happening? The humidity levels being really high. Sure enough, wrong size HVAC system. And you as a homeowner don't need to know the exact system you need, but you need to be on top of it and proactive to say, hey, you're about to install a system. Is it sized properly? And tell me why, based on square footage and sizing of all that unit. Because how the system is installed is a really, really huge part.
Definitely. And I think what a lot of people don't know is that your AC is in some ways a dehumidifier,
Right,
and it's actually meant to help regulate your humidity.
right.
So if it's too big, it can actually under-regulate that,
Yeah,
or too small, but too small also. Um, but super important to have that, and whether it's the vetting part is really difficult for all these,
for
but I
sure.
think really educating yourself is the number one tool to save yourself money, at least in the long run.
Yeah,
Short term you might spend a little more to really get that top tier professional, but in the long run it'll save you. And I think knowledge is power, and I think one of the best things we can help people understand is the basic biology. Like, control that humidity or moisture, and you will control the mold.
exactly.
It's not really a chemical
That's
answer,
right.
especially if you're using bleach, for example, which is typically water based. You're not exactly helping. You can be making matters worse. But
100%.
if you can control the humidity in your home, that which is moisture in the air, or the actual moisture on your surfaces, then you're going to be in really good shape, at least to prevent major catastrophe.
Yep.
Um, and not just, I always tell people also clean air and clean surfaces. If you can master those, which includes moisture in your air, if you
Yeah,
can master clean air and clean surfaces in your property, then you're in really good shape off the bat.
that's
Um,
right.
but of course, removal is ultimately key. We
Right.
really want to remove this mold, take it, drive it 10 miles out, and throw it off a cliff. Don't just spray it and paint it.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah, man, that's really, really good stuff. Another one, this is an interesting one. So a lot of people walk in to a home, they're looking at one, they see a water stain, like a little light orange kind of brownish stain on the drywall, maybe. And many times there's really, to me, it's one of two things. So let's say we're in the upstairs master bathroom and we see that type of watermark on this side from the inside of the bathroom. Well, I go up into the attic and pull the insulation back and make sure I'm right above where the stain is to see, is it the tip of the iceberg? Is that little watermark actually 10 times worse and a big black green gooey colony on the backside? Many times it has been, and good. We found what we needed to find, and we go ahead and handle it accordingly. But I've also been fooled by that same looking water stain where I've gotten up there, pull the insulation back, and there's nothing to be found. And I'm yelling down there, it's like, "Are you sure I'm over top of this? Are we here?" And they're hitting it, and we're like, "Yeah, we're right there." I couldn't see anything on that side. I even ripped some of the paper of the drywall back. I don't see anything there. I said, all right, I'm just going to swab this just in case to see if there's anything even invisible, just to make sure. Sure enough, nothing comes back. So what happened in that case? In that case, there was probably a very slight either roof leak or a quick sweating of the duct above it or whatever it might be that dripped on it. It then drips through, stains, and it naturally then dries itself out within 24 to 48 hours, not giving it a chance to really grow mold. Could you then replace the drywall with a contractor and just get it done that way? Yeah, you could paint right over it that way if you don't like the look of it. But I've also been fooled, like I said, thinking there was a big mold colony on the backside, and multiple times nothing. So to give you guys a balanced approach and not get so kind of triggered by a watermark there, you just need to go check it. You just need to go make sure, is this a bigger situation on the backside that does need to be remediated properly, or was it a one-time thing, quickly dried itself out, and there wasn't a chance for mold to grow?
yeah, definitely. And I think it's a super important point. Like, even if you should be hiring professionals for all of this, but as a homeowner or even a renter, you should be once in a while take a peek in the attic,
For sure.
maybe even take a sniff, just see, hey, is there a dead body in my attic? Or, take a look in the basement. Is the basement filled with 3 feet of water?
Right.
It's good to look around your home and just kind of take things in. And that's kind of what we do as inspectors, is we're really just looking for anything that seems a little out of the ordinary.
Right.
Even something like a sofa on top of an air vent, most people don't think of that as a huge microbial disaster. But what people don't realize is once this mold comes or the bacteria, this stuff can become contaminated
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
And you really want to be ahead of it. Um, and I hear people and I see a lot of people online like, oh, we don't want to do a mold test because maybe it'll affect the value of our home and we're not sure if we're going to be here forever. And I tell them, like, first of all, your health should come first, in my opinion, but you're not necessarily hurting the value of the home. If you find a mold problem, you're going to fix it and preserve the value of the home.
Right.
And if anything, the value goes down every day if you have a leak or you have mold that just continues to get
Right.
worse. um, there's nothing, and if you're watching, I hope you take this home, that there's nothing more important than your health.
Yeah.
There's no mansion, no car, no nothing that can replace being in good health,
Yeah.
or even being in okay health. There's always room for improvement, but there's always, it could always be worse. So we want to stay on top of it.
For sure. For sure.
Um, Also, I get a lot of comments on the content, and some of it, really disturbing, like people in the military, not to mention the schools, the hospitals,
Huge.
colleges, but like we talk about knowledge is power, and like these are our learning places or our healing places or our actual places of strength, like the military. And we really have to be, I just had a comment before this. Oh, we weren't allowed to report mold to our higher ups in the military because we would get in trouble. So we would paint over it. But it's like, we have to take care of our soldiers, our kids, people in the hospitals think that that's a place for healing. And then people get exposed to mold in a hospital or in a doctor's
Right.
office. And it's really important to know not only your environment, also the environment you're going to,
Yeah.
whether if you're going to the military, going to a hospital, you're sending your kids off to college. You don't want the college that was filled with black mold. I mean,
Yeah. Right.
there's no ifs, ands, or buts, and it's really
Right.
hard to get people to take action
Yeah.
from the top.
Yeah, I think most people watching this, maybe not, but most people I think would know that, mold can be a real burden on the body. And from a health standpoint, they're kind of convinced it's not good to be breathing it in. And if you're not convinced, we're breathing 3,000 gallons of air per day. If 2,000 of those gallons are in a contaminated environment, just imagine, pumping that amount into your body. It's trying to hold off that first invader, and then now it's immune suppressed for the rest of the functions in the body. And it, unfortunately, our bodies do take on, kind of interpret these as pathogens to go and defend. So there's a lot on that. You guys can go down the, learning from the doctors and everybody about more of the health concerns. From a home standpoint, I really believe that the home is a first place to handle, because you want to clean the aquarium before healing the fish. And that's a bit of what the mold assessor can do, is go and really assess what places are most contributing to the health of the home being compromised. HVAC systems are huge. Why? Because if it's contaminated and it's pumping out a lot of air all day, that's a big, motherboard kind of source. And then we want to find all the other sources that are adding up to it. The two little micro spots on a windowsill that maybe condensed one time and mixed with some dust is probably not the thing that's rocking your health. It probably is a bigger, more surface area, is being affected, is probably what we want to be handling first. One, this ERMI test is really got a lot of popularity. I will say I've interpreted hundreds and hundreds of them, and one lady sends me an ERMI and it's fairly low. I see ERMIs all the time, and I see them most of the time. 90% of them are very, very high, I'll just say. So the goal of an ERMI is just to have it as one piece of the puzzle, but really visually inspect the area to see what's causing the ERMI to be what it is. Well, this ERMI is fairly low, but if I was irresponsible and didn't care, I would say, oh, your ERMI is fairly low. You're probably good to go, bye. But in this case, I said, let's still check all the boxes, because I don't know if I trust the ERMI to do all of our decision making for us. Let's use logic and use our trained eye and our senses to go and really find these areas, go and check these spots. So I tell her, you have wallpaper. She told me in our consultation, we have wallpaper in like multiple rooms of the home, exterior wall, even a bathroom. I said, go check that wallpaper pretty well. She was about to buy this house. She ERMI'd. The ERMI looks fairly good. Well, sure enough, she sends me photos pulling the wallpaper back a little bit, and it's just visible growth all behind there. I said, your ERMI wouldn't have told me that. So again, if you just get a random ERMI interpretation from someone and all they go off of, because that's all you can go off of, I don't care how smart you are, if you go off of just what the ERMI says, you all you have to say is, oh, that's high, that's kind of middle of the road, or that's low. That gives us no actionable data. And in this case, it was a lower ERMI, but we still have to take the most like advantageous approach, which is actually assessing the home. And so she was able to get that handled as well. The wallpaper, which was pretty big issue. Can't rely on one
Absolutely.
test, you know.
Yeah, and I could talk about ERMI for days and days for so many reasons, but I do love the ERMI test, just like I love every mold test. But I always tell people, especially as someone who I consult with people about their results, even people I've never done the assessment, but I'm looking at the
Right,
results. And they're like, well, the ERMI's really low. I don't know why I'm sick. Or the air samples were really low. And I love air samples too. I mean,
right,
every good IEP
for,
does. You
for
should have an
sure.
ERMI and air samples. But the thing is you can never rely on a sample
Right,
to determine your health. Just like you
exactly.
can't, even if it's a doctor, sometimes doctors, you need a second opinion. You can never rely on a mold test. If anything, the number one thing should be the inspection. Hire
That's
someone
right.
to come in and look around. The
That's
samples
right.
are a secondary thing to help find hidden problems. Like an air sample can help you find an invisible problem, or
That's
even
right.
an ERMI can help you find something that you never would see at an inspection. But you never want to rely on them. And I see a lot of people, especially on Facebook. There's some big mold groups on
Yeah.
Facebook
Yeah.
where I feel they do steer people kind of wrong. And there's a big emphasis on ERMI. And either way, if you have an ERMI, whether it's good or bad, you're gonna need to bring in a professional assessor
Exactly.
to find the problems.
It's
So an ERMI could be very helpful, but you might as well get that assessor in, let the assessor do the ERMI. And I tell people, be very careful with doing an ERMI, because if you disturb that dust, and one of the things I wanted to bring up is mold often looks just like dust. And we're talking about like a white layer on top of a dresser.
yep.
Fully, and if you go to dust that, you're literally exposing yourself to billions of spores. And it's not an exaggeration. We see millions of spores on our reports all the time.
Right.
And when it's airborne and you're talking millions or billions, these things hit your lungs, and it really is, even before it gets to your lungs, these
Done.
mycotoxins are
It's
coming
gotta be.
straight through the
Yeah.
the blood-brain barrier. But you're under attack. Your immune system can't do what it needs to do. So definitely, the DIY method, the self-help method, you have to be careful. Sometimes it's more serious than that. You
Yeah.
really, I've seen people who are quite frankly falling apart, big black circles under the eyes. They look like they're not doing that well. And the ceiling is black, like it was painted black. You know, it's really more serious, and a lot of
For
the
sure.
the deniers, the deniers are there. They're on
Yeah.
on online, so we have to keep
Yeah.
fighting.
Yeah, man. And when you're vetting an inspector, there's a lot you can, but the main one to me is someone who cares and who's curious enough to actually be thorough. So you would probably agree, I don't know, but as an inspector, if I gave you two options, you have either 3 hours to do a full assessment, but you're not allowed to test. Full assessment, 3 hours, go anywhere you want in the house, visual, and you have a moisture meter and a flashlight in hand, but you're not allowed to test. Versus you're not allowed to assess the area. All you can do is set up 5 air samples and take an ERMI test, but you're not allowed to look anywhere. You just get the test results. Which are you going to get more data from? 1,000% from a trained eye
Yeah,
inspecting the home. The test will fill in the gaps, confirm or deny what we're finding. But if you know your way around the house and what you're looking for, this is what the knowledge we're trying to impart to homeowners. You can get the ball rolling by identifying these, then get the assessor in. You already know the spots. We need more eyes on these areas. Then you get more information and you point, you say, Jonathan, we need testing here, assess this, put your readings on there. But you're already ahead of the curve as a homeowner, already knowing. It's like going to the car mechanic. I already know the issue here, so they're not going to come and tell you, oh, you got a messed up, part of your motor that you're like, no, I'm a mechanic myself, and I already know it's fine. So this is the same deal with the house. Um, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like the words are covering your face. I can't.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I fixed it. But no, definitely the assessor every time beats the actual test. There's tests you can buy where they'll ship you the test kit, and you buy it at Home Depot, and it's not giving you the assessment that you need. It's giving you
Right,
a small snapshot in time.
right.
Maybe if you're lucky, you performed it correctly and you got a little info, but 99% of the time there can be a false negative or a bad reading.
Right.
And like you said, you should hire someone that cares. I think that's the most
For sure.
important. If someone who cares for themselves, they can take care of you. And if they're just a caring person, but having a mold inspector who will also interpret the results with you is
Yes,
so important
for
because,
sure.
I've heard too many times that the inspector just came in, took a good amount of money, went off to Mexico literally, and didn't go over the results. You really need someone to, and you'll see people posting these results online all the time. They're like, what do these results mean?
Right.
Well, how did you get them? Like,
Yeah.
did this guy just disappear?
Right.
Um,
That's a huge one. That's a huge one. You mentioned this white kind of layer. So this is again trying to give you guys a trained eye. We all know mold can be black, right? Black toxic mold. But how about the other kind of nuanced ways to look at it? And I mentioned on my Instagram story leading up to this that I was going to tell you a story about the flash with flash and without flash type of photo of the same piece of wood. So I was doing a clearance inspection, and this was sweating ducts, big issues in the ceiling cavity. So they had to rip the entire ceiling out of the first floor, and they do that. They had to clean all the wood, which they did. But I get there, and with my naked eye, with no light, the wood looked fairly good. But getting up on a ladder and putting a flashlight on the wood at like a nice 45-degree angle, or skimming it parallel, you can see what's actually on the surface of that wood. So to really properly clear, how the lumber is looking, you want to put a nice light on it. Well, what I saw with the light was this very light kind of textured, circular at times, but mainly just textured white kind of powdery dusting. And that could just be innocent dust, you'd think. But no, I put a swab on it, and that was the first time I really, really realized very early on in my inspection. I was like, that is condition 3 aspergillus, still growing. Those remediators missed that spot. And I'm like, guys, you have to go around with a bright flashlight, or I'm gonna keep coming back, failing your remediation over and over until you get this right. So they had a lot more, cleaning of the wood to do in that case with that surface growth. You have to vacuum the first layer off, remediators would, put the peroxide on there, let it kind of bubble up, and really you're cleaning the wood manually, not just spray and walk away type of deal. And so that was a big kind of aha moment for me, was the white, gray, greenish, like lighter substance is an aspergillus and penicillium like type of mold many times.
yeah, definitely. I mean, the black mold thing is a huge,
More obvious though. Yeah,
distraction for people.
right.
Um, a lot of times you see one kind of mold on this side of the wall. The other side of the wall could have 10, 20 other kinds of mold, and it looks like
For sure.
kind of like your background behind you. You have 30
Yeah.
different molds, kind of a cool mold background. But definitely, just super important to keep an eye on. And that's why I tell people you should not have any dust, you should not have any dirt, because if you really, if the place is clean, the place is clean. You can't confuse dust for mold because there's no dust. But
Yeah.
really, it's tricky in those attics, especially,
Yeah.
for a number of reasons, to get them cleaned properly.
Yeah.
It's like we got to build attics that people can get around in.
That's a good point,
um,
man. Yeah.
and my good buddy just called us some studs, so I appreciate that, Tyler. But
Thank you.
also, when you buy a home, you should look into this. Is the attic accessible? Is it clean? Is there major water damage? Are the ducts, touching the drywall? Is
Yeah.
there
That.
condensation?
Yeah.
These are things you got to look out for when buying, or even renting is one of the worst, because you're kind of stuck in a lot of cases, and you really have to know your rights. But
That's right.
whether
Yeah.
you're renting, and I'm kind of doing the law focus as well, you
That's
really
huge.
do have to know your rights with mold. I think it's huge for renters,
Yeah.
but also for homeowners and sellers, whether you have to disclose the mold, you
Right.
know, how's it going to affect the value, and people really should speak with attorneys,
Yeah.
local attorneys. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
if you do have knowledge on that, which being in law yourself is really really huge, guys. I mean, go consult with him on that type of stuff. But if you would want us to do a live, a few months out from now, talking a little bit more of the legal side of this, if you feel good and comfortable with that, I know it's going to be different per state, and there's a lot of other nuances with it, but that might be a really high value live to do in the future as well. I have a quick insurance story. So this lady had a massive leak in the tub. It moved into the closet, and she gets insurance to come in, and they ripped everything out, dried it out, and put dehues up, and all was good. Okay, that's what I heard. But I was brought in as a third party to really assess this with, unbiased. And I get in there, guys. Literally, the wood is still saturated. My moisture meter is reading as high as it can on all this wood. I'm like, but they just pulled the dehumidifiers out. They said it was fully dry. Where how did they confirm that? Just visually or just a amount of time? Oh, the dehus have been going for, 3 days, that's enough, or 5 days even, that's enough. They did not remove enough material. They did not manually dry and clean enough. And so because I was able to get there at that time, we were able to start to get the drying process going again. But as I even looked deeper, there was already growth that had happened in all those days that had passed of it not being dried. So now it turned from a water damage restoration, like I said at the beginning, to now a mold remediation where they had to do, significant containments, a lot more removal, had to get the whole bathroom gutted and then do more drying. You see how many backtracking we had to do because it wasn't done right the first time. This is really important to have a moisture meter. You can get a decent one for under $100, a really good one for 400 or 500, like I like to use. But for the everyday homeowner, get a good one for right about $100, and you can be able to check these spots on different materials as well. But that was a really big one that saved her a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And not just the moisture meter, but also the actual thermal camera, I think is super
Yeah.
helpful. Although it's maybe a little technical and people might not understand it, but you're looking for cold or hot spots. Usually a cold spot would be
Right.
wet. But if you just, once in a while, especially during a rainstorm,
That's right. That's the
check
best
your
time.
roofs, check your windows, check your walls for water, check the plumbing for leaks. If you really have that moisture in your home under control, you're in good shape. But it's important that you bring up, well, if it's dry, then everything is okay. And that's not really the case, right?
Right.
Something could be dry. And I've seen homes recently, we had a lot of rain here in Florida. I've seen homes where there was literally so much water coming into the attic that I would refuse to go in there. But if it was a dry, sunny day, you can't always find a roof leak. So that's another important thing. Just because something is dry now, it might not be dry next week.
Right.
So if there was anything that's still there, we got to get it out, especially if it's even if there's dry mold, which is not good by any means. We don't want that to get wet in a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks.
Right.
So I always try to lean on even if it's dry, I like to see it removed if it was water damaged.
For sure.
In an ideal world, we want to replace stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, you can't just replace your whole home. So you have to understand, what do I do with drywall versus what do I do with plywood
Yeah.
versus what do I do with my sofa versus my t-shirt. And I
Hmm.
actually saw you had some great stuff on your page about that, porous or semi-porous, or a lot of times it comes down to, is it really worth keeping it? If you're
Right.
super, super sick, do you really want to keep the blanket that was covered in mold? You
Yeah.
know, uh,
No, in that case, not at all. No.
yeah. And we see it all the time, mold on clothes, mold on sofas, mold inside your shoes, your watches. Like, people don't understand, but you got this in your pocket,
Yeah.
it's on your wrist. Like, you're
Yep.
really exposed to it more than just the typical,
Yeah.
it's rough.
Anytime there's visible growth, that white gray spotting is usually what will show up, maybe black, but that circular pattern on a porous item, it can't be saved at that point. If it's visibly already colonized and growing there, it's embedded in the fibers there, and it really can't be saved. With oh, I had a mold situation in the corner of my house, and then I had porous items on the opposite side of the home. That's like really, really hard to measure, and that's where you do want to consult with someone on what is best for your situation based on all the variables at place, your health, what types and amounts are we dealing with, and all that stuff. But a good rule of thumb: if there's visible growth, usually a humidity issue that embedded itself into a porous item, it really can't be saved. It's got to be tossed. And yeah, I consult with people on this all the time based on their home situation to really find that sweet spot and not go to any extreme, which is ignoring it, or the other extreme is trying to get rid of absolutely everything and trying to gut the house. That's not necessary every time either. Just depends on the severity of the issue. One more final story, at least from my end, was a beautiful house. Terrible, unfortunately. It was the bottom of a hill. This is a mansion on a lake, so we got a lake behind them and a big hill going down towards the house on the front end. They had really bad waterproofing in the crawl space, humidity raised, and the crawl space was very humid. They did not in the new. Sorry, just got a call. Not sure if you can hear me still. Um, the in the building process, the vapor barrier of the crawl space and all the different things they were supposed to do to waterproof it wasn't done till towards the end of the building process. So it already had the humidity from the lake and the rainstorms, all that, building up humidity under the home. And then they decide to go and put the vapor barrier and all that stuff. The damage has already been done. So the crawl space is already in bad condition. But to me, let's handle the crawl space effectively, and the rest of your house was in really good condition. That's what, in their case, the rest of their home was in really good condition. I still would recommend the whole house be clean based on the amount of the crawl space that had really high amounts of aspergillus down there, moving up from the stacking effect and air pressure changes, moving it upwards. But what happened in this case, which really kind of blew me away, was the husband is in his front office working every day, and he's developing all these symptoms out of nowhere. So I thought, it's definitely the crawl space. Let's handle that. But I get there, and the duct from the crawl space of his HVAC system had detached in his office. So it's now even more dumping the pulling the air from below up into his office. I put an air sample in his office, and this is a beautifully clean, immaculate office. You would not think there's a mold issue, but it's right on top of one. So that air sample was one of the highest I'd ever seen of Aspergillus and Penicillium, like 300 plus thousand raw counts on spores. I'm like, what the heck? It's drawing so much air from the crawl space below that was contaminated. And so now the house needed that much more thorough cleaning. Making sure that ductwork is attached, sealed right, and then properly insulated around those boots are really, really key.
Definitely. And vapor barriers are a huge thing that I
A
think
must.
a lot of people have no
Yeah,
clue about. Even in the attic, there's forms of that people try to get going and condition their attics, which is like a whole nother conversation. But it's like you said, often I recommend a full home cleaning and really clean everything. And people look at me like, how could you tell us to clean our whole home? That's crazy. But it's like, this is your home where you live. You got to clean the walls, you got to clean the ceilings. Like, you may not even realize, but there could be invisible growth there, or spores or toxins.
yeah,
But the vapor barrier is super important. And really, I've seen some beautiful crawl spaces that look like, you could eat dinner down there. And I think people really should have more focus on cleanliness, especially for your health. And I think a lot of people don't put two and two together, and doctors aren't typically like, oh, you should clean your home or even test your home. But a lot of the good doctors who I think have some of the best success rates are the ones who tell people check your environment.
for sure.
Um, and like you said, 6 days or even 6 hours of being in a clean environment, I think you can see a lot of symptoms going down. You can start to feel a lot better. Um, and people
Great.
can find out if you leave your home and you instantly feel better, or
That's a big one.
you go on a vacation. And this is how you can start to narrow down which of the buildings that I'm in are sick, the sick building syndrome. Or maybe it's all of them. Sometimes there's mold at work and at home and at the gym, and that's just, frankly, there probably is. But people really got to understand how to deal
Yeah,
with it.
yeah,
um, and then the more health side of it is like, how does the body deal with it? How do you
yes,
detox? How
yeah,
does your body naturally detox? How can I support my organs? And,
huge.
should I be pooping every day or should I be pooping once a week? Stuff like that, there's multiple levels to it, but it's really a
Yeah,
comprehensive thing. And the home and the body are basically one,
that's right.
and they
That's
got to
right.
be, treated similarly.
Yeah, man. And the body's a common denominator. So as much as I'm, biased towards getting the house in order, I'm actually more biased towards healing the body. That's what got me in this industry to begin with is spirit, soul, body, full of, like top to bottom of the body. How do we get this, which is our common denominator, more strong and more resilient and naturally doing what it's supposed to do because it's made to heal when it doesn't have those interferences, and mold can be one of those interferences. So we're just trying to lower that burden and give the body what it needs. We can start, ripping through these questions if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
awesome. So yeah, I just scrolled to the top. Bacterial sprays claiming to remove the basis for mold. I guess the root of it by introducing bacteria instead. Have you heard of that? Like
I'm still trying to mess with the chat. Okay, what do you think
okay,
of the bacterial sprays claiming to remove? So I think those are like the probiotics or prebiotics that I've heard about. I would never think to introduce bacteria. It's interesting, but I mean, what we know about mold is that when it's under attack, it will release toxins as a defense mechanism.
Right. This stuff's a conscious being.
Right, and
Yeah.
hopefully Agnes is still here to hear the answer. But in general, whether it's I'm gonna send in the bacteria or I'm gonna send in the chemical, I don't lean towards that method. I lean towards let's remove the
Yeah,
problem materials.
that's
And
right.
the basis for mold is moisture, just like all the other life on this planet. And yes, mold is alive, by the way. Um, it needs moisture, it needs water, and it's more resilient. It can last a long time without water. But I'm not sure how introducing bacteria even would really
If,
work because I'm
yeah,
guessing there'd be some kind of water base for that.
right. Yeah, I don't know
Which,
what
yeah,
I don't know what product exactly you're talking about, but yes, let's pull the stuff out, and then as far as preventative steps and final cleaning steps, maybe something like that. Again, I don't know which product you're exactly talking about, but the best and safest bet is removing the contamination as much as we can. Let's see. Amber said, "Do you think that products like Homebiotic are similar?" Okay, okay, Homebiotic now. Travel and home. I haven't done as much research on Homebiotic specifically. If it is a kind of, um,
it is. Yeah, the millions of bacteria like a probiotic.
okay,
Um,
I wouldn't just put that on a mold source. I wouldn't do that by itself. I really don't believe any right now. What we have, like a spray is enough to handle a full colony. Mold, okay, mold is a plant or a tree at a when you really look at its actual structure, it's got roots and then it kind of sprouts up into its colony. So even if I were to come in and kill a plant, it's still present even if it's dead. If there's an animal in your house and I just kill the animal but leave the body, it's still present there. The exposure is still happening. So the goal is removal, and then maybe homebiotic is good after everything is clean. I mean, maybe that's a better option. The biggest statistical correlation when it comes to healing concerns and success stories are helpful. Yes, of course. Glad some experts to learn here. Awesome. Yes, thank you for that. Um, Eczema clearing up, that's great. Screenshot that one. Two
yeah.
root cause problems with the HVAC units and ductwork. If you want to hit on one or two, maybe common ones that like actually proliferate mold in the HVAC system. You mentioned condensation, but how would that happen? Do you know, or what are some of the things you've seen?
Um, yes, so I mean they're all important, every aspect of the AC unit. Definitely condensation, but what leads to that? Cold air leaks.
Yeah,
So, I'll take my thermal camera, and I have a pretty nice FLIR, and I'll point it at the AC unit, and you can see where the cold air is coming out.
right.
What do you know when you look there? It's actually wet, and you'll see the ductwork is soaking wet.
Yep.
So cold air leaks, it's got to be sealed with high rated mastic or
Yes.
and it's tough to get in there a lot of the time. There's also something really cool called like a double-sided encapsulation, which I learned from one of the higher guys at Natica. But it's not only encapsulating the inside of the duct, but also the outside, like the attic
Yep.
side. That can be super helpful. Again, nothing's perfect.
I mean, you
Um,
would do that on clean ductwork though. You don't just
yeah,
encapsulate over top of mold, right?
yeah. I mean, after a month, that mold will, even the best mold paints in the world, the mold will love to eat that for lunch. That's another thing people don't